Good morning. My name is Maximilian Dąbkowski, and I am a graduate student at the University of California, Berkeley. Today, I will talk about the morphological domains and idiosyncrasies in AINGE stress. My proposal is that a verbal stress assignment in AINGE targets the right edge of the verbal inflectional domain, showing sensitivity to morphological domains, and that particular morphemes delete preceding stress, showing morpheme-specific effects. Thus, a pattern which at first sight could be described as irregular is really systematic when morphological domains and morpheme-specific stress rules are considered. Previous descriptions of the language do not fully capture the stress facts. Now, Ainge or Kofan is an endangered Amazonian language spoken by the Kofan people in northeast Ecuador and southern Colombia. The language is predominantly headmarking and heavily suffixing. All the data in this paper come from my own fieldwork. First, let's consider the basic verb structure. In Ainge, the suffixes expressing voice, aspect, and associated motion can appear only on verbs. Thus, we can combine the precumulative suffix hi with the verb panza, we get panzahi, which means about to hunt. We cannot combine the same suffix with a noun, thus we cannot say tsandiehi, to mean about to be a man. This is not a semantic restriction since nouns can function as predicates. Stress here is marked with the acute accent and an underline. Other suffixes, however, for example, expressing plurality, reality, and polarity, can appear on predicates of any lexical class. Thus, the plural subject fa, which encodes the plurality of subject, can combine with a verb. We get panzafa, to mean they hunted, and it can also combine with a noun. We get tsandiefa, to mean they are men. The verbal inflectional morphemes precede the predicate level morphemes. Thus, we can say that the verb stem and the verbal inflectional morphemes create a verbal inflectional domain within a larger predicate domain. In 3, the two domains are delimited by curly braces and abbreviated as verb and pred, respectively. Now, let's consider stress within the inflectional domain. Basically, there are two classes of verbal stems in Ainge: underlyingly stressless and with underlying word initial stress. Underlyingly stressless verbs are assigned penultimate stress by default. We can see this in panza and atapa. However, in verbs with underlying word initial stress, that stress is preserved in the surface forms. Thus, we get afa and kundase. Observe that both 4a and 5a have penultimate stress on the surface. I have said, nevertheless, that they are underlyingly different. This can be seen by looking at forms inflected with morphemes, which are inside the verbal domain. Those suffixes count for the calculation of the default penultimate stress. Thus, if we attach hi to panza, we assign stress to the penultimate syllable within the inflected verb. Thus, we get panzahi. When we attach hi to atapa, we calculate the penultimate stress within the entire inflected verb, we get atapahi. However, stress is not reassigned to the penultimate syllable if it is underlyingly present. Thus, stress in verbs with initial stress remains on the first syllable. Thus, we get afahi and kondasehi. So the difference in the underlying form between 4a panza and 5a afa is revealed by the stress difference between 6a panzahi, where stress is assigned to the penultimate syllable by default, and 7a afahi, where initial stress is preserved. Now let's look at the stress within the larger predicate domain. When predicate level morphology is present, stress is assigned to the last syllable of the verbal inflectional domain. In 8a, panzahifa, we see that the stress falls on the syllable which immediately precedes the predicate domain. However, stress assignment in 8a is not the default penultimate stress, which we can see in forms with more than one predicate level suffix. In 8b, for example, stress falls on the antepenultimate syllable, panzahiyambi. However, lexical stress of a stem is unaffected. Thus, in 9, afahifayambi, lexically listed word initial stress is retained. Stress is not reassigned to the last syllable of the verbal inflectional domain. And finally, let's look at stress-deleting suffixes. In Ainge, certain suffixes within the verbal inflectional domain, such as the passive ye or the reciprocal ko, delete pre-existing stress from the verb stem. These suffixes are represented with a subscripted empty set. Whether a suffix deletes stress or not is not predictable from its semantics or syntax. By deleting lexical stress, these morphemes make the underlyingly stressed verbs behave like the underlyingly stressless ones. Thus, when a stress-deleting suffix is present and there are no predicate-level suffixes, then stress is assigned to the penultimate syllable even if the stem is underlyingly stressed. So if we attach the stress-deleting passive ye to panza, we get stress on the penultimate syllable, panzaye. This is expected. However, we also get stress on the penultimate syllable of afaye, despite the fact that afa has underlying stress on the first syllable. This is possible because the suffix ye deletes this underlying stress before the stress is assigned to the penultimate syllable of the verb. Again, in 11a, we see panzayehi with penultimate stress on ye. This is expected because panza is underlyingly stressless. However, we also get penultimate stress in 11b, afayehi, despite the fact that afa has underlyingly present stress on the first syllable. Again, this is possible because ye deletes this stress before the penultimate stress assignment. And finally, if predicate level morphemes are present, stress falls on the last syllable of the verbal inflectional domain. Thus, in a longer form, such as 12, we can see that ye first deletes stress from the first syllable of afa, which allows then later for the stress to be assigned to the last syllable of the verbal inflectional domain. Thus, we get afaye hifaya. In conclusion, I showed that Ainge stress assignment can be accounted for by recognizing two morphological domains and morpheme-specific rules. Stress is assigned to the right edge of the verbal inflectional domain, and particular suffixes delete pre-existing stress. In the appendix, I also present a semi-formal analysis couched in cophonologies by face, a framework of the phonology syntax interface which naturally captures the role of morphological domains in Ainge stress assignment while allowing for the idiosyncratic stress deletion. Any comments and questions are very welcome. Thank you very much.